It's springtime, finally! Now, springtime as a knitter can really only mean one thing. It's time for summer knits. To me, summer knitting is about softer drapes, lighter fabrics, maybe a more fitted silhouette, but most importantly, it's about a whole new category of yarn to get excited about. And in recent weeks, I've been doing a lot of digging into the topic for some of my own projects, and I was so surprised by how little I actually know about summer yarns. So I thought I'd share some of the wisdom that I have gained with you guys so that you can make a better choice for your next summer garment. Little spoiler alert, you can use wool in summer, and I'll show you how. If you don't know who I am, my name is Maria. I'm a mama of one. I live in Glasgow, and I design knitwear, and I make little YouTube videos about all things knitting. There is a podcast on this channel. I also have a knit and chat. I'm doing vlogs and a lot more of these, hopefully deep dive videos into a topic. If that sounds like your jam, then please consider subscribing, and let's get right into the video. Now, before we deep dive into summer yarns, let's talk about the qualities that we want our summer fabrics to have to establish a common ground of what we actually need. The first thing that I want is lightness, something that's airy, that doesn't sit heavily on my body. The second thing that's important, I think, is breathability, something that allows air to circulate around your skin and for moisture to move away from it. And the third thing that I want is moisture absorbance, something that takes the sweat away from my body and leaves me feeling cool and dry. So now, how do we create these things? I think lightness is really defined by the density of the fabric. And that in turn is defined by the thickness of your yarn or the weight of your yarn and the needles that you're using. So if, for example, you're using something thick, like an Aran weight, with something that's a really thin needle, like a 3mm, you're going to create a really dense fabric because you're going to fit a lot of stitches and therefore a lot of yarn into an inch. Than if you were to use something like a 5 or 6mm needle, where you're going to create a much more open weave. So the way that we define lightness is by the fabric density, and that's in our control in terms of choosing the right yarn with the right needles for whatever outcome you want. So when it comes to summer yarns, I personally like using a thinner yarn with a slightly thicker needle to create a bit more of an open weave and therefore a bit more of a light fabric. So breathability and moisture absorbance are really something that's defined by the fiber of your yarn. So let's head back inside and talk about fiber content. Okay, let's talk fiber contents. That's really just what your yarn is made of. There's 4 categories of fibers that we can choose from as knitters. The first one is animal-based fibers. That's things like wool, alpaca. The second one is plant-based fibers, so cotton, linen, probably what you think of when you think of summer yarns. The third one is biosynthetic fibers, so that's things like viscose, modal, lyocell. And the last one is synthetic fibers, so things like nylon, acrylic. Let's just dive into each of these categories now and see how well they're suited for summer knits. All right, let's start with plant-based fibers. There is a reason why they've taken the top spot for summer knits for so long. They are durable, they're breathable, they're hypoallergenic, which is good for anyone who's got sensitive skin and doesn't tolerate wool very well. And also they're easy to care for. Often you can just chuck them in the washing machine on a low cycle. However, the problem is that they are quite heavy and stiff, so they tend to droop and sag over time, which means your garment might lose shape over time. To combat that, yarn companies often mix these plant-based fibers with other fibers that have more elasticity, like wool, to give them a bit more shape and grip and also allow them to hold their shape over time. What they also do is they spin these fibers in different ways to give them more elasticity and structure, like in a chain net spin. What you could do as the knitter to combat some of these problems with plant-based fibers is the choice of patterns. You really want to look for something that has seams, so something that's knitted flat and is then sewn together at the end, because these seams, especially here along the shoulders, will give structure and hold to the garment. If you can't find anything that you like that has seams built in, what you could look for is things that have picked up shoulder lines, because they again give structure. Things like raglans would also lend a bit of structure, but not as much as seamed garments would. You really want to stay away from anything that's around your construction which doesn't have any seams at all, because that will mean your garment will just droop and lose shape over time, which is so sad because of all the work that you've put into it. Another thing that you want to consider with these type of yarns is how slick and sleek they are, which means that they'll slip off your needles quite easily, especially if you're using metal needles. So a way to combat that is actually using things like wooden or bamboo needles especially. They give a little bit more grip and mean that you've got a bit more control over your stitches. All right, now let's look into some specific plant-based fibers. So linen is really one of my personal favorites to wear in summer. It's strong, it's cooling, it's moisture absorbing, it's breathable. It adds a really beautiful drape to your garments. What's also nice about linen is that the more you wash it, the softer it'll become, and best of all, it doesn't pull. Hands down, one of the best qualities of it. As with other plant-based yarns, the problems are that it's very heavy, it's stiff, and it's inelastic. I've already talked about the issues this will create for your garment and its shape over time. However, specifically the stiffness of linen will also create problems when knitting certain patterns. So anything highly structured like cables will be really tricky to do with linen yarn. You're best to stay away from things like that and stick with stockinette and maybe even lace designs. And your hands will definitely thank you for it as well. If you're looking for some recommendations of where to start, I've knitted with Drops Bell in the past and I found that to knit up very well and easily. That is a DK weight yarn and it's 53% cotton with 33% viscose and 14% linen, and you get 120 meters and 50 grams and you only pay £2 per skein. If you'd like something a bit more heavy on the linen side, you could look for Rowan's Creative Linen. That's 50% linen and 50% cotton, and you get 200 meters and 100 grams for £11.80. If you want something purely linen, you could look for Isaria's Whole Organic Linen. That's 100% linen, like I said, and it's a fingering weight, and you get 178 meters and 50 grams, and you pay £8.75 for it. I have tried this one before, and I must say it's very stiff and it's a little bit harsh almost, so I don't know if I'd use that on my own. But if you're interested, it's out there. Now, cotton has some of the same features as linen yarn. It is very durable, moisture wicking, breathable, but most importantly, and the biggest difference to linen really, is that it's softer than linen. However, one of the bigger drawbacks to cotton is that it stretches over time. Hence why, again, it's very often blended with other yarns or spun in a way that gives it a lot more structure. The Isaga Eco Baby, for example, is spun in a chain net way to give it that structure, but it's also blended with 68% alpaca. That's a DK weight yarn and you get 150 meters and 50 grams for £8. One of the most well-loved summer yarns, I think, is Knitting for Olive's Cotton Merino. That's 70% cotton, 30% merino. It's a fingering weight yarn and you get 250 meters and 50 grams. And you pay £8.95 per skein. If you want something a bit heavier weight that's purely cotton, you could look for Drops Paris. That's an Aran weight yarn. You get 75 meters and 50 grams for only £1.20. One of my absolute favorites that I love to knit with every summer is Rowan's Summer Light 4-ply. That's 100% Egyptian cotton. It feels wonderfully soft. It has a tiny bit of a sheen. It's very luxurious. It's a 4-ply like the name says, but it also does come in DK variation. And you get 175 meters and 50 grams for that 4-ply, and you pay £5.70 for it. I think it's quite obvious why plant-based yarns have been so popular for so long when it comes to summer knitting. Their qualities really speak for them. The drawbacks are something to keep in mind, especially when you're choosing a pattern. So make sure that you have something with seams in it in order to guarantee the longevity of your garment. However, if you kind of fancy a little bit of a change from these plant-based fibers, or if you just don't like how heavy and stiff they are, do consider biosynthetic fibers. That's the next topic we're going to dive into. Now, to me, biosynthetic fibers sounded really processed, not very environmentally friendly. I was a bit hesitant to look into them too much, especially also as knitters. We're used to using pure natural materials with all the wool that we have as choices. But biosynthetic fibers can be some of the most environmentally friendly yarns that you can choose from because of the clever production process that's behind them. In general, any of the biosynthetic fibers come from wood chip and they're heavily processed to be made into a spinnable fiber. That's why they're called biosynthetic. They come from a plant source but have to be processed to be made into something that we can knit with. You've probably seen words like Tencel, lyocell, rayon, viscose, modal on yarn labels. All of these are biosynthetic fibers. And they can be just as great a choice for summer knits as plant-based fibers are, because they are really breathable, they're lightweight, they have a great sheen and drape to them. But they have some of the same drawbacks as plant-based fibers because they're really inelastic, which means they can droop and drag again over time. And also these ones are prone to mildew. Okay, so let's look into some biosynthetic fibers. One fiber that I was dying to talk about in this video is Tencel lyocell. I keep saying Tencel and it's called Tencel. Sorry. It's a very innovative and clever product because it doesn't only just close the cycle within its own production, but also the life cycle of the garment, because Tencel lyocell is fully biodegradable. Let's start at the beginning though. Tencel, that name itself is trademarked by the Austrian textile company Lenzing. And Tencel lyocell is made from wood pulp from sustainable sources. They really pride themselves in being sustainable. And it's in the way that it's processed that Tencel lyocell really excels. So 99.8% of the solvents and remaining emissions are actually recovered and reused in this process, which makes it super environmentally friendly. Tencel lyocell itself has a very fine, soft structure. It's very silk-like, has a lot of sheen to it. It's quite durable, moisture-wicking, and it feels much cooler than linen on your skin. Like I've just said, I'm so intrigued by this fiber and the way that it's made, and I want to make a standalone video on it, so more to come. But I would love to knit a full garment with it first to give my experience on what it's like to knit with it. So if you guys have any suggestions of summer garments that you love to wear, please leave them in the comments below so that I know what to knit with this yarn. If you want some recommendations of Tencel lyocell yarn, you could look for Tina tape yarn from Wool and the Gang. That's 100% lyocell Tencel, and you get 150 meters in 100 grams. And it costs you £10.50. If you're looking for any Saga summer yarn that has linen in it, maybe check out the Saga Trio 2, because this one has got 50% linen in it, 30% cotton, and also 20% Tencel lyocell. So it's a little bit more pliable and soft than the Her linen that I talked about earlier. And you get 175 meters in 50 grams. It's a sport weight, by the way, and it's £7.75 per skein. If you'd like a 4-ply Tencel yarn, you could look for Tribe Yarns Vegan Silk Tencel. That is 400 meters and 100 grams, and you pay £21.50 for it. Now, another biosynthetic fiber that you might not thought was a biosynthetic one is bamboo. It's because it really needs a lot of processing to be made into something that's workable as yarn. Bamboo is a great wood. It grows very quickly, you don't need any pesticides to treat it, and you can harvest it without having to fell the entire tree. So it's super sustainable. The way that bamboo is manufactured really influences the way that it feels, but generally it's a very soft fabric, it's very smooth, and it has a lot of shine to it. It's kind of giving a silk-like finish as well. What's also nice about bamboo is that it's fade resistant, it gives a beautiful drape, and it has some UV protection in it. However, as with anything, you always need to make sure you wear proper UV protection when you go out in the sun. The disadvantages, same as with other biosynthetic plant-based yarns. It droops over time, it's not very elastic, and this one actually also loses its strength in water, so when it gets wet. If you want to try anything with bamboo in it, you could look for the King Cole Bamboo Cotton DK. That's 48% bamboo, 52% cotton. It's a DK yarn, like the name says, and you get 230 meters and 100 grams for £5.80. You could also look for the Tencel bamboo mix. Go Handmade is the brand. They have got their Tencel bamboo double, which is a 4-ply, and that's 60% bamboo, 40% Tencel, and you get 130 meters in 50 grams for £5.50. Wool is really a chameleon of a fiber. The outside of it is hygroscopic, meaning it repels water, whereas the inside of the wool fiber is hydrophilic, meaning it attracts water. So wool can actually absorb 1/3 of its bulk weight in water without feeling wet, and retaining its warmth and warming properties. For our warmer summer days, this means wool can absorb moisture from your body, leaving you feeling cool and dry. Now, when it comes to wool knitting for summer garments, what I personally like to do is look for something like a fingering or sport weight wool yarn and then knit it on larger needles to give me a more open weave, so to create a less dense fabric. If that's not your jam and if you don't really like how it looks, what you can do is look for a mix between wool and maybe a plant-based or a synthetic fiber to give you some of the structure of wool, but maybe add some of the coolness and breathability that things like cotton or Tencel have. One of the yarns that you can look at is from West Yorkshire Spinners. It's Elements DK. That's a 60% Tencel lyocell and a 40% Falkland Island wool, and you get 122 meters and 50 grams for £4.50. If you want something that has a plant-based fiber in it, maybe look at Drops Cotton Merino, which is 50% cotton, 50% merino wool, and that's a DK yarn with 110 meters and 50 grams. And you pay only £3.20 for a skein of that. Let's quickly brush on synthetic yarns. They really don't have a massive role when it comes to summer knits because they are not very breathable, they don't absorb moisture very well, and they don't regulate your temperature really well at all. However, what they do is they add strength. So often you see it mixed in with something that's not very strong, like a woolen fiber, in order to make it more durable. So sock yarn often has things like nylon added to it, just for that reason. So really avoid 100% synthetic yarns when it comes to summer knits and look for something that's got a little bit of it added for some durability. So in conclusion, what have we learned from this video and from looking into different fibers for different summer yarns? Plant-based fibers are a great choice in terms of breathability, cooling on your skin, they wick moisture away, they are very durable. However, they are very stiff and heavy and inelastic, which will affect how your garment wears over time and how it ages. You can combat that to some degree by choosing patterns that have seams in them, but it might be best to choose plant-based yarns that have other animal fibers added into them to give that extra elasticity and strength to them to ensure that things will look beautiful for years to come. What really surprised me was how great biosynthetic fibers are in terms of environmentally friendliness and how lovely they can be as summer yarns. They have some of the same qualities as plant-based fibers, some of the same drawbacks. It's just as inelastic. However, if you want something that has a really wonderful drape to it and that luster shine that silk gives, biosynthetic fibers are something that you should definitely look out for. Like I said, I'm personally so intrigued. I do want to make a standalone video on it and I want to knit with it. So again, if you have suggestions of your favorite summer knits, please leave them in the comments below. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something from it and you take that in and choose your next summer project wisely with your new summer yarn. I've certainly learned a lot. I really enjoyed filming this video and there'll be more of these type of videos to come. If you like this type of video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more. I also do little videos like knits and chats or vlogs. I'm about to start a series on how I design a piece from start to finish, so stay tuned for that. And I just hope to see you guys again soon. Take care. Bye.